Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to Australia, good morning to America, good evening to Europe. I want to express my feelings to repeat again that the promotion of Greek philosophy in English deprives the deep knowledge of the spirit of the holy original of wisdom. The divine language is the correspondence of nature to the human mind. The thought comes first, the speech, then the speech, and then the writing. We continue our Hellenic education with the lesson 9, and right now I give the floor to Professor Mr. John Hadzopoulos.
Thank you, Coordinator. Welcome to the Hellenic Education Lecture number 9, lesson number 9. Over here are the links of the previous lectures in the YouTube. And in today's lecture, we are going to talk about the Orphic egg in the universe. Actually, we are part of the universe, and it is necessary to try and understand within human dimensions and beyond of this, its structure and functioning. And here are some of the topics we are going to cover today. In the laboratory, Eleni has prepared the short story Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. And here are the links for this story. We start today's lecture with the role of the unit of measurement in the geometric structure of a shape and the number 3.14, the pi. With the pi, just 3.14, we can draw any circle, or I would say infinite number of circles. They follow all this equation here, like the perimeter is equal 2 times the pi multiplied by the radius, or pi multiplied by the diameter. And the pi is the ratio between the circumference over the diameter. The pi is an irrational number. That means cannot be equal to a ratio of two numbers, and has infinite number of digits. Here are some of them. Now, without having the size of the radius, then we have infinite number of circles, and we have a chaos, actually, of circles. Now, another number that we need to know about the structure of the universe is the golden number 5, that usually is used for the structure of the universe for proportions and analogies between the bodies in the universe. And this number also is a very strange number. It comes out if we take a small piece of line, a line segment, and we try to divide into 2 parts, the alpha and beta you see here, so that the ratio alpha over beta to be equal to the alpha plus beta over alpha. And this ratio, we call it lambda. Now, if we substitute the alpha with the lambda beta, which comes from this equation, then we end up with the second degree equation of this form. And if we solve it, we get 2 roots. The one is 1.68 with all this infinite number of digits. And the other is minus 0.68 with 618 with all this number of digits. Now, some extraordinary attributes of the phi is that phi squared, for example, is 1 plus 1 phi. Phi third is 1 plus 2 phi, and so forth. And let's see, phi in the 10th power is, we take this 34 coefficient here and put it there as a constant. We add these two things, 21 and 34, and we put it as a coefficient here for 5, and we get the 5 in the 10th power. The same thing, we can get any one of this one from the previous one. Okay, this is some extraordinary attributes. Also, the 1/5 is 0.618 with all this infinite number of digits. This is also an irrational number with infinite number of digits. Because the ancient people, they use in the temples for the dimensions of the temples, the orthogonal dimensions, this ratio of phi. In the island of Naxos, we have this, probably it was the entrance of a temple, of the Apollo temple here in the island of Naxos. And someone asked me, what are the dimensions there? So I took a camera and I used photogrammetry and I calculated the dimensions. This was 3.8 width, the clear opening, and 5.8 the height. I put them there to get the ratio. It was 1.53. And it was about 5% within the limits of the golden ratio, the phi, which is okay. Usually that's the limit they were working to approach this ratio here. Therefore, the geometric structure of universe uses these two numbers to get with the pi the shape and with the phi the proportions and the analogies. And in my opinion, there must be a third number like this one here that is used in the standard normal distribution of Gauss. And this is the base of the Neper logarithms. This is also an irrational number with infinite number of digits, as you can see here. And this number gives the tolerance, okay? Because the dimensions, they are not exact. Okay, we have elliptical, circular, okay, some tolerance limits. They are within this distribution curve may be used to study the tolerance limits. We must emphasize here also that even with these three numbers here, without the unit of measurement, still we have chaos. We cannot create a universe. Now, let's see from the Greek mythology about cosmogonia, how the universe was created. The Orphic poems, they tell us that it was the so-called Orphic egg that was hatched and created the universe. This egg had inside three things. The ether, that is a substance that creates matter and its interconnection, and we'll explain later on what it is. The phanis, that is the light, call it phanis, phos, phanis, and the gold of love, erotas, eros, that is the world attraction, the gravity. Now, if we combine this Orphic egg with Pythagoras' geometric structure of the universe, we have these three numbers here. And also Pythagoras, what he does is he puts a horizontal line here. And below this horizontal line puts the hyperlogic outside of the human limits. And in this hyperlogic, he locates one entity called n, or 1. And over the line is the conventional logic, the logic we understand. What's happening now is this n provides the Orphic egg the unit. This circle here, this first circle, the radius, the size of the radius, for example, of the circle. And then based on this unit, the first universe is formed right here. Then working with the phi, multiplying this unit by phi, we locate this second point here, and we draw the second universe here. And then again, based on the phi, the proportion, we create this center here, and we get this other, the blue universe. Moving in this way, we can create, according to Pythagoras, all these universes along this primary line, about 13 universes. Why 13? Because beyond, actually, as we approach 13, the gravity forces are so loose that they cannot hold matter. Also, there must be other 3 directions on the one side of this central line, and the other 3 directions here, a total of 7 directions with 13 universes in each direction. That's the geometric structure of the universe according to Pythagoras, combining with the Orphic egg. Now this idea, which I just told you about, is developed by Hippokrates Dakoglou, a Greek civil engineer. And in his, you can see his name here, and he wrote a book about it. He wrote several books, actually, in this direction. Now, he's also talking about Pythagoras, had this equation, 0 plus infinite is equal to 1. And 1 is the logarithm of the n. As we said, here is the n, okay? And you can see here the logarithm of the n, which is 1. The same thing, 1 is the logarithm of Theos, which is the God. And again, this logarithm ends out to be equal to 1. In my interpretation of this equation here is that 0 is the material, because according to Timaeus, which was a student of Pythagoras, is always born but never exists. That's the material, the matter. And infinite is the spirit. Again, according to Timaeus, always exists but was never born. And the theory of the Big Bang is similar, that the matter was concentrated at a point with 0 dimension, and that's the matter. I mean, according to the modern theory of the Big Bang, all this universe we see was concentrated, all the material in one point. Okay, and then was a big explosion and started moving in all directions, creating the universe. The spirit here, the infinite, is the unlimited knowledge, the information that shapes matter from scratch and forms the universe. Now, the ether is a system of traditional quantum physics, which behaves inherently concurrent as a wave of a double spiral helix, and at the same time as an energy particle that follows the universal laws of creation of the universe, revealed by Pythagoras based on the golden number phi. The ether is on the one hand ambiguous in its essence, with subatomic particles with charges positive and negative, and at the same time with a wave, and on the other hand it is tri-existent, as it forms a traditional space and defines a traditional time. And let's take a look at this. This is how the ether works. As the Orphic egg, hatches, gets out, the ether starts from a point, as you can see here, in a double helix. The one helix goes like this, clockwise, the other goes counterclockwise. The one is positive, and the other is negative. And at the crossing right here, they create the particles of the mass. The mass is created. The material is created at the crossings. And according to the Hippocratic Dakoglu, if we change the, say, this, the positive to be the other direction and the negative the other direction, then we create particles of the entire material. In this way, like it goes now, it creates particles with this here, say, direction, creates particles of material. If we change this direction, then we get anti-material. Now, our planet system, as you can see here, is consisted of the sun at the center and the planets moving around. Now, over here, if we take the Mercury, which is the closest to the sun planet, as being the unit 1, then Venus must be, according to Pythagoras' analysis, 1 multiplied by 5. The Earth, which is the third planet, is equal to 1, this unit, the distance of Mercury, multiplied by 5 squared, and so forth. And then that's how the distances of the planets are. But of course, they are not working. It doesn't work this way, because the 5th planet probably was exploded, and the wave of the explosion pushed the other planets to be further away. And you can see here also how it works. We are using, like the D1 is the distance from Mercury from the sun, as you can see this distance in kilometers. If we multiply that by phi square, we get this 150 million something kilometers, which is the distance of the Earth from the sun. Now, Hippocrates Dakoglu created this table and say that these are the Pythagoras calculated values. These are the observed values. Of course, if you follow the rule I told you about phi, you will see that probably this, the Earth and the Mars and the asteroids comply to that equation. The other ones you have to take into consideration the explosion here in the asteroids in order to find these distances here. But again, Pythagoras has created the algorithm also how to calculate these distances here. But they are not exactly as multiplied by phi in the 5th power, for example, here, all right? It doesn't work that way, work in a different way. Now, let's go into our brain structure, which is based on neurons. You can see here an equivalent, say, electronic circuit, and that's how the neurons are within our human brain. And we are talking about billions of neurons, all right? And let's see what are they and how they work. Actually, a neuron like this one, you see have several parts, the nucleus and the dendrites around, okay? And then it has this one here, the axon, and some nodes over here, and then the axon, the terminals here, some other dendrites. And let's see how these neurons are interconnected together. The interconnection of these neurons is called synapses. And look at this interconnection here, what's going on. I mean, is not to admire someone, this, whoever invented this, I don't know, it's really admirable. It's out of any kind of thinking, okay, that humans are able to do. We do with electronics. I studied electronics and everything, but this thing here is really a miracle. It's something, you know, out of it's difficult someone to conceive it, because we are talking about billions of neurons, okay, to have all this exchange of information in this synapses, as you can see here, all right? So the only way, one way to understand how neurons work is the artificial neural networks we use in the computers. And you know, what we can do is really very simple things. Actually, myself, I was working on this on a doctoral thesis I was supervising. And the student I was supervising wrote his own software to create this neural network. And this is part of what he developed there. The simple neuron structure is this one. You have 3 input, say, cells here that you enter information in each one of them. And then this information gets to this, say, getting into a conclusion. This Y is the conclusion of what information you put here and what is the output you get out of this input information. To get this output, you have to have in the synapses, these are the synapses, the connection between this neuron and this one, okay? And in the synapses, you have the so-called weights, W1, W2, W3. And what you get here is you get the result. The Y is by multiplying the input information by the weight and adding them together with this very simple equation you see here. Now, if we try to do a more complicated neuron structure in the computer, we have again these green neurons are the input, and then we have a layer of neurons here called hidden layer that interconnects, each hidden layer interconnects with all input neurons. You see this one is interconnected here. And these synapses also, they carry, each synapse carries weight there. And then we have this output layer, or maybe if we want, we may have one output layer there, or this output layer with neurons, okay, which are also interconnected with this hidden layer neurons. Now, let's say that we want to educate this, train this neuron structure. What we can do is we take sets of values, like P1 is one set of values, P2 the second set, N set, okay? But for this set of values, we know what the outcome is. For instance, for P1, we know that the outcome is Y1, okay? So when we feed with these values here, the neuron, and we get the output, we compare what we get here with what we expect to get, and we get the so-called error, epsilon E1, E2 error, okay? And this error helps us to go and do the feedback, change the weights of the neurons, of the synapses here, and try again until we get convergence. But to get convergence, then you have to work with some mathematics like calculus, okay, and things like that. And these mathematics, they work like this, okay, as you can get the output to get one result here, then you have a function that gets with the weights, as we said earlier here, and you have to see the differences we said earlier, if they are within some limits to get the feedback. And also we can get this f2x, as you can see here, which is a logistic function. Actually, this type of situation is to get the result here 1 or 0. For instance, in this particular case that we were working is to see if this location on the Earth is going to to have the ignition of the fire, or say a forest fire, or we don't, or the probability how much is to ignite the fire right here. And in this particular problem, over here, all these samples, they were of past fires. Okay, we have say all the ground data for all these past fires, and we knew the result. Okay, that's how we did the training of the neuron structure here. Because again, the fire, the ignition, the possibility for ignition of a fire somewhere on the Earth, okay, a point on the Earth is a chaotic event, is not something easy to get with mathematics. That's how we use the neural networks here, all right? And for instance, this is one of the indices we use, called the fire hazard index, depending on 4 levels of information, like the fuel, like the grass, the condition of the fuel, like the moisture, the elevation, and the aspect, the orientation of the, say, land surface. And here is, I already gave you this example here, how we can compromise all these different things to be added together, because if we try to add fuel, say grass and aspect, for instance, you know, it's totally different. Then we do the normalization process. I already told you. They give you this example, like, and while the elevations are like this in meters, if we normalize them, they get values. All these values, they are transformed between 1 and 0. And because the transformation has the same units in numerator and denominator, they are unitless and they are able to be added together. So that's how we feed the neural network. Actually, if we are to feed that neural network, for instance, we'll take, for instance, this value here, this, the first, this, 4 values, okay? Then we take another set of values like this one, the yellow part, yellow-brown part values, the blue values, okay, another set, and so on. And some other also mathematics we use, because as I told you, we have to have convergency there, and we take into consideration how to modify the weights, and we use this logistic function here to get the these modifications we need to do. And this is also like the calculus I told you that we have to use, like the derivative, okay, to see in which direction to increase the weights. Now, let's talk about the internet and social networking. The internet is an open-ended wealth of knowledge on all issues, but mixed up with a lot of junk. The educated person, however, can distinguish the correct and useful knowledge from the garbage by criteria if they disturb the internal and external balance and for what purpose. Therefore, social media facilitates the communication of people and contributes to the organization of all kinds of events, but their value is maintained when people impose restrictions on free expression, while their value decreases when the companies that manage them impose such restrictions, and we're in this situation. That's the reason we have this value now in jeopardy of the social networking. Where we go? Recent censorship by high-tech companies that manage social media shows that we are not on the right track. People surrender their own free will for complete control by high-tech systems. And we, unfortunately, we are in this situation now. The primary focus of the globalization process is on the markets, and people are not far from being completely replaced by, and perhaps completely exterminated by the robots. I don't know if this, like artificial intelligence, etc., and high tech has already taken control. But we are approaching that point. Now, I finish today's lecture, and I want to say a few things about the last lab regarding the internal balance of the king before and after. And if we take the king before, we will see that his desire and anger are into the regular limits, okay? And he is trying to find the balance in logic, but he is not capable by himself, so he takes his advisors, and his advisors put the logic over here. It's a over the limits logic without conclusion. So the difference between the balancing logic and the advisor's logic is the human error. Now, if this human error is within the mid space of virtue, then we may say that the decisions the king made based on the advisors are correct, are acceptably correct. If this is out of the limits, then there is a problem there. But the king did not stop with the advisor's decisions. He went back to the hermit, and he managed to get the correct logic and return out of this short story situation to a real good kid looking for the good. Thank you very much. The floor must be to the Helen now to coordinate the laboratory for this particular lesson. Helen. Helen, your microphone is off.
Unmute.
Please unmute your microphone. Helen, we cannot hear you.
Here it is. I found.
No.
Okay, now it's okay. Okay.
As I said, Professor Hadzopoulos, thank you so much. Your information boggles my mind. I cannot say that I understand any of it. Just maybe a tiny bit, but it's and it's difficult for me to make a transition into the workshop phase, but I hope we can try. That's all I can say. So today we have a wonderfully marvelous essay, short story, written by George Orwell. It has obviously been a point of contention for many, many years. A lot of studies, a lot of people have debated its value, its points, etc. So I think today what we can do is to do an overview of the story of the essay and try to make a little bit more sense in terms of the Greek philosophers and how they might approach understanding the actions of the characters. And not only the characters, but also the status quo that the characters are participants in. So we can go to the second slide, the characters. So who are the characters? By the way, the essay was written not at the time that Orwell was actually in Burma as part of the global machine of the British imperial, imperial state, but 10 years later. And so he is, you know, with the benefit of 10 years of experience, he is looking back and writing about what happened. And that is kind of an interesting way of trying to establish an understanding for him and for the readers. So George Orwell is, of course, a police officer, and he's working working for the British government. He has a central role. We come to understand. Now, remember, this is 10 years after. We come to understand that he despises the project in Burma. He sides with the Burmese people, who, by the way, are not a monolith. The Burmese people are not a monolith. As you probably are aware, they the country of Burma, as it is today, is comprised of something like 80 or 90 different ethnic groups. But let us call them the Burmese people. Sides with the Burmese people, yet attempts to prove his authority to the Burmese, displaying an air of absurdity and directionlessness. He doesn't have a direction. The only direction he takes and the only direction that he assumes and puts into effect are the directions he has from his superiors. However, in his mind, he's very, very conflicted. Inherently, he is very racist. And again, I must say that he continues to be a racist 10 years on in the 1930s. He himself, in other words, has become, up until the point that he writes this, he is a colonized subject himself. He's part of a system. He hasn't broken out of it. He is part of it, and he is, and later on, of course, there are changes in George Orwell himself. But at this point, he's still part of a system that he despises, but at the same time, he despises the people that he oppresses, that the system oppresses. And he himself has a problem with his own actions. So a few of the other characters, which are interesting, the Indian constables and the Burmese sub-inspector, they answer to British authority. They wait for Orwell at the bazaar where the elephant has been wrecked. They have no independent activity. They're not able to act independently. They act upon the authority of the British colonial government. However, there are some issues that come up with that. We'll talk about that later, I hope. The dead man, we have the body that is trampled into the mud by the rampaging elephant. We also have the coolie who was smashed by the elephant and described in a very nasty way, as opposed to the elephant. So we have actually the way that the body is described is quite awful. Excuse me for one moment. I'm just looking at it's quite awful, but it's also the way that Orwell describes the body is interesting. If you remember some of the words he uses, it's a black body. It has a very horrible grin. He's very demeaning. He writes in a very demeaning way about this poor man who was smashed by the leg of the elephant. There's some symbolism involved there as well. All right, so the elephant. The character of the elephant is a central symbol of the story, I believe. He uses it to represent the effect of colonialism on both the colonizer and the colonized. Orwell never spoke about the symbolism. This is just information that I've researched over the years, that it can be seen. The elephant can be seen as a symbol of British oppression, can be seen that way. And it's interesting at the end of the essay to see how Orwell describes the elephant dying. Now, remember, the title of this essay is The Shooting, not the death of the elephant. It's the shooting of the elephant. The dying process is very long and it's very sympathetic. Then we have the Burmese people themselves. They're seen as being all the same, no distinct characteristics except their poverty, their despicable ways. He describes them all as the yellow. They're yellow sea of people. He talks about how the only thing to remember, he said, as a police officer is never to show your fear. So in that sense, we can see that the colonizers are also afraid of those they colonize. I'm not going to go into this in detail because I know that you've read the essay. You know what is going on in this colonial situation. The main character, Orwell, shows a lot of ambivalence. He's almost schizophrenic. He's on one hand, he faults the British Empire and what they're doing to this country. And on the other hand, he actually hates the people that are being colonized. It's a kind of a chasm between what he sees as being an immoral exercise, and on the other hand, the people who are victimized, he hates. And I think that's where the racism, the inherent racism comes into play. It could be seen as racism. It can be seen in other ways as well. It will be interesting to know what you might think. The dilemma, conflicting emotions. We know that the elephant is just going through a phase. It's not a wild animal. It is a tamed elephant who has broken its chain temporarily. So when he realizes that, and he realizes that he should not kill this animal, but in effect he does because of the eyes of the people upon him. He must fulfill their expectations. Very interesting, of course, is at the end of the essay, how he keeps shooting. He doesn't stop shooting the elephant. He wants to put it out of his misery. The elephant doesn't die easily. Takes the elephant quite a long time to die. What does this mean? What is the symbolism of this creature who is unable to die and yet he continues to pump bullets into it. It's very interesting to note that he measures the life of that elephant in much more respectful ways than he measures the life of the Burmese coolie whom the elephant has trampled. Just a couple images here. The out of control elephant must be disciplined. Justice is done, but for who? The theater, the location of the killing. Spectators as colonized. So the people who are watching this theater, they are colonized. And finally, the elephant is completely subdued, just as they are. What does that mean? There are symbols. As a police officer, Orwell's presence holds symbolic power in Burmese society. And as the colonial officer holds a different kind of symbolism. What kind? Questions just putting out there, what kind? The tortured body, the image of the naked, scarred buttocks of the prisoner represents the power structure dominant in the geographical domain. The smashed body of the Black Dravidian. Again, we have these images of human beings who are completely smashed by a power that does not regard them at all. The elephant, the rampaging elephant, is a symbol of Burmese society. Now, earlier I said it's a symbol, it could be interpreted as a symbol of the colonial, the colonizer. It depends on, there are different interpretations of that as well. And the crowd, the motif of the crowd reflecting in the eyes of reflects the eyes of the Burmese society. They're closely observing their colonizers and being observed as in a prison themselves. So there's this mutual observation that goes on in the society. I have some possible questions, but we can talk about these questions later. So does Orwell do the right thing by killing the elephant? How are Orwell's actions virtuous or not? How do the Burmese people view his actions? I think that we see that their first reaction to the dying elephant or the dead elephant is simply to dismember it for food. So in that sense, they're very grateful. As a servant of the Imperial British, Orwell appears conflicted about his role, but powerless to act as an individual by his conscience. How would the Greek philosophers evaluate this struggle? We'll look at the chart in a little while. Let's go on. Now, thank you very much. Professor Hadzopoulos sent back his comments, some of the story that he found interesting, and I think everybody has different parts of this story that they find interesting as well, but we do have these excerpts here. Here are some of the quotes by Orwell. I did not even know that the British Empire is dying. Still less did I know that it is a great deal better than the younger empires that are going to supplant it. Well, we know that there are empires that have come after the British Empire. I'm not sure that the British Empire is really dead, but maybe in one form it is. But he doesn't tell us. He doesn't tell us much about who he's thinking about, although we might consider, of course, the coming of the the German Nazi empire in the of course in the 1930s and 40s. He was Orwell was very much aware that it was rising. Maybe he would consider he was still alive with the coming American empire. I don't know. Here's another quote. A story always sounds clear enough at a distance, but the nearer you get to the scene of events, the vaguer it becomes. I'm not sure why you thought this was an interesting quote, Professor Hadzopoulos. I think that, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, how, you know, ordinary people, they change things by talking to each other, the transformation of the news, how it propagates, which is very interesting.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Another quote, I perceived in this moment that when the white man turns tyrant, it is his own freedom that he destroys. I think we can also say, in the context of the Burmese colonial experiment, we know what the white man refers to the exploiter, he who exploits. And finally, he wears a mask and his face grows to fit it. Wonderful quote. Wonderful quote. Okay, so now we go to our chart. And we have filled in some of these spaces, but I'm hoping that members of the class can continue to fill in and discuss. I added a few extra points here, a few extra to this, but let's go first to Orwell, the shooter, who's doing the shooting. And we can look at this, we can describe it. I think it's very interesting. Since I am a student as well of Plato and Aristotle in terms of literature, I would expect to be critiqued. Here we have, Orwell has sufficient logic to balance his desire and anger. I'm only guessing or theorizing here that I'm theorizing that the fact that he is constantly thinking about what he's doing in this very difficult, oppressive situation shows sufficient logic. And I'm not sure that's what you meant.
Right.
He conforms to the standard of what is right, the state, the people. He conforms. Temperance is shown in his reasoning process. This is what I have put in. He shows insufficient logic as he cannot act based on right and wrong. He shows sufficient logic to show no fear. This is where I'm confused with this kind of understanding of Plato because of the setting, because of the situation. We are in a very, very illogical, very unbalanced setting, a very exploitative setting. I don't know how people can react. How can they act normally, any of us? How can we act in a balanced way when we are living in a very unbalanced situation? This is where I have a problem with Plato. I'm just putting this out there. Anybody can respond to that? Okay, well, oh, please, yes.
Well, may I have?
Please, yes, of course.
Okay, okay. The effort of these lectures is to point out when do we have internal and external balance. So when we analyze a chapter, we have to find out the sentences, the ideas of internal or external balance. So I go through the dramatic act of killing the elephant by his repetitive application of bullets in disparate parts of the body earns him acclaim from the natives. For Orwell, this action means that society is killed, not the elephant. An exaggerated external balance of democracy. The act of killing was performed by the police officer who was the measure, the value of life of the Barmy schoolie, whom the elephant trampled with the value of the animal that he himself killed. It means that human life in this area cost less than an animal, an exaggerated lack of external balance of democracy. The lack of internal balance deprives logic to a degree of exaggeration in the interest of the rules with catastrophic consequences for the poor people. The actions of people take time until the moment they reach their ears and eyes. According to what was prevalent among the elderly, killing the elephant was logic, but not for the young, who considered it a pity. So here we have an excessive desire on both sides. The question is what was the right thing to do? By my opinion, the society was suffering of everyday killing. The purpose of the story was not the killing of the elephant, but a message to the rulers. So Orwell describes an incident in which an elephant in a hormonal disorder broke its chain and its delirium killed a porter. When the young English policeman arrived, the elephant had calmed down and could easily be led back to his boss house. Orwell, however, could not resist the silent pressure of the crowd for blood and was forced to shoot the elephant. When a white man becomes a tyrant, he destroys his own freedom, concludes Orwell, who later fought against all forms of fascism. At this time, Greece is something like Orwell's elephant, but also like the intruder that gathers the malice of others. While we make efforts to control the excesses that created the problem, at the same time, we react to vigorously that others are worried that the Greek disease may infect them. Fear and anger lead to the demand to see Greece limited and the Greeks punished. It is like the crowd demanding the death of the elephant in anticipation of the shots becomes a requirement which leads to the extermination of the dangerous object. This is how many see the Greeks. This is how many Greeks see the compatriots. Unprotected in a fortified society, we are afraid that our neighbor is the elephant that will harm us, while others see us as elephants. In our weakness, we have become important. We have become frightening, regardless of whether our fear is greater than the one we cause. That's it. Thank you.
Well said.
Yes, that's absolutely amazing how you juxtapose the situation of the Greek people, how you are able to show the connection between this essay and what Greece is suffering today and what many other countries as well are suffering. Thank you so very much for that. So does anybody else have any comments or would like to add to our chart? Stella, what do you think? What are you thinking about?
I'm sorry, can you hold on? Yeah, hold on. I'm sorry. My son is just in the middle. We're just having people over because of, hold on 1 second. I apologize.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Does anyone else, would anybody else like to, our colleague from Australia, please help jump in. Let us know. Hello. What do you think?
Well, Eleni, thank you. I was thrilled
Jeremy.
to read. Yeah, I was thrilled to read this short story by Orwell because I'm one of his greatest fans.
Oh, good. Me too.
Yeah. And in fact, I wasn't even aware of this, which is a little bit strange. You really do find some very interesting literature for us to work on here. Yes, well, in Orwell's inimitable style, he puts one. I think that the most telling part of this story was, and I can't remember verbatim, but it was probably the last sentence where he said that he did what he did because he didn't want to look like a fool.
Oh, yeah.
And the act of compliance, or what he felt that he was doing correctly, was in fact such a stupid act that he knew in hindsight he could have avoided. So, yeah, it's all about, I suppose it's about violence in society and culture. There certainly is it's a metaphor for, or perhaps an allegory for humanity as such. And I take Dimitri's point that not only the Greek people are in that position, but most countries throughout the world are being marginalized and destroyed culture-wise. So for one of the great writers of all time, I was very pleased to read that story because, he is compelling and everything is symbolic. So it was a great story, and thanks for that choice.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you too for your input. I think that he is also, Orwell is to be commended as well for his ability to develop his ideas over the years. He never got stuck into one kind of philosophy or one kind of ideology. He was able to develop his ideas through his own experience, and that makes him an even better thinker and writer than most. So, yeah, the last line in his essay, I often wondered whether any of the others, and I guess he's thinking about his compatriots, his fellow British officers, if any of the others grasped that I had done it, that he had shot the elephant solely to avoid looking a fool. Yeah. That's exactly what he says. Another interesting line right before that, he says, among the Europeans' opinion was divided. The older men said, and here is where it gets interesting between the older and the younger. The older men said, I was right to shoot the elephant. The younger men said, it was a damn shame to shoot an elephant for killing a coolie, because an elephant was worth more than any damn Karinji coolie. And so it's interesting that the older men have a different kind of perception of shooting the elephant. I mean, why even bother to shoot it? Just because he killed a damn Indian, who cares? But it's interesting with the younger ones, even more frightening, I would say, more frightening in a way. That because they bring in the notion of value, of monetary value into the equation, which I think has developed very quickly in our world as we see it today. Anybody else would like to say anything? Otherwise, I don't know if my comments that I have included here are accurate or not. But they are what they are.
Yes, Eleni.
Yes, please. I would love to hear. Yes.
I want to comment on the previous question about what will come back if the British Empire, dies and some other, say, people come up in power and they will be worse.
Yes, yes.
And, probably Orwell, he knew that someone else is pulling the strings of the British to manage the empire. And probably he knew that the same people they pull the strings of the British, they will pull the strings of the next governors. And they will choose them to be worse than the British, okay, in order to pursue their interests there. And we know that mostly behind these things, those they pull the strings, even today are a part of those, are the bankers that they do it, okay? And they go through governments. We are in the case, for instance, today, that we are not talking about people, we are talking about the markets, okay? And the same thing, you see the young people there, they talk about the price of the elephant, okay? We're talking about, again, the same thing. And,
yes.
But I think all these comments are really related to this story, are really very interesting. And your work, Eleni, also is very nice work, very nice effort. But
Professor Hadzopoulos, you mentioned the term "pulling the strings," and then I did hear you say the bankers, the banking system, etc. Is that who you refer to? Over the years, as I've read this and done research on this particular essay. Read Edward Said, which I'll show you in a minute. I noticed that the British East India Company, which was a banking firm, actually kind of a quasi-independent government established in London in 1599, actually developed into eventually the great imperial project of the 18th and 19th centuries. Is that who you're referring to, the bankers?
Well, we have evidence today that, for instance, a small percentage of the less than 1% of the global population has in his possession about 50% of the total wealth. And it is impossible, those people, this is completely out of balance. And this, in order to keep that wealth, they must pull the strings of the governments in various countries. They must gather data to control each individual, and they have managed to a certain degree today, because there is a video on the World Economic Forum about an Israeli professor that talking about hacking the human mind. For example, we have the technology to hack the human mind. So they have, those they pull the strings, they have progressed a lot since then. Okay, we are in a very worse situation today than that.
Okay,
and,
well, I thank you for that. And I also have my last slide, and I will send this presentation to everybody later. And the last slide, of course, is my take on what we have today. It's not exactly what it was, but it's another kind of domination of peoples all over the world. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. And okay.
And also I want to point out, like today's lecture, okay, that those they control the high tech. It's impossible. Those they have the money, they can buy everything. And I was one time, say in the early 80s, I had a software company myself. And when I developed a program, then those with the big money came to evaluate it immediately. And if they would find it interesting, they would buy it. But some others, they developed the same thing, was better than mine, and they bought that one. So you have to understand that this is happening. Okay, and to this, the financial wealth concentrated in a few people, this is completely out of balance, and it is the worst thing that is happening today.
John, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for 1,000 years. Look, I take Dimitri's point earlier, and I suppose that one of the objectives of this group and the discussion and the lectures is to look at a more balanced understanding of ourselves and nature, and try to use virtue to navigate our way through life. One of the things that I think is missing from what we've been discussing is that, if I can put it this way, there is a very simple understanding of Aristotle versus Plato from a philosophical point of view. For Aristotle, it's the outside in. The outside affects the inside. From Plato, it's the inside creates the outside. Now, when in your lectures, you're focusing very much on Aristotle's cosmogony or worldview, and that is that you're creating a discussion that's very heavily embedded in concepts like, gravity and matter and, different things that you accept as affecting the world. Mm-hmm. But yet these things do not affect the world because they don't exist. There is no matter, universe, atoms, gravity. These things are concepts. And if they're understood from the Platonic point of view, it very much balances one's understanding of existence. From the Platonic point of view, all of Aristotle's understanding of the world is complete illusion. And this isn't part of what we're talking about. And I think it's a missing element to this conversation. So I'll just leave that with you. And you know, I think it's everything seems to be quite balanced in this discussion, except for the fact where you're talking about the nature. Because nature is not a thing that exists outside of us. It is ours. It is what we create from the Platonic point of view. I shall leave you with those comments. But,
well, thank you, Jerome. And I would say that I am glad you participate in this discussion. Really, you give us, you know, food to work out in this direction. But to tell you the truth, I don't try to think as an Aristotle or as Plato. I try to think as myself, as a simple human being. I agree with you about the illusion. Actually, as illusion, in one of my lectures, I said that everything is virtual reality. Okay, the past is virtual reality. The future is virtual reality. What is reality? Is actually the momentum, which is in zero time. Okay, but if we think in this way, what we manage to do is to get out of human dimensions. This is my expression I can put there. We have to stay.
Well, John, just on that point, John, when you say something like human dimensions, you're putting an adjective in front of a concept. You know, there is no human, there is the self.
Yeah, self.
You know, and when you generalize by saying human dimensions or human understandings, these things are not relevant to what we're really talking about. You're classifying what you think we think.
I tried to see if what I am thinking is acceptable by others, and I am glad if I hear that is not acceptable. I do something, you know, that I mix things up and so forth.
Yeah,
all right.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that to hear
well,
that.
This is not a case of being right or wrong. It's a case of the balance.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, we haven't actually discussed anywhere in this conversation the Platonic cosmogony, the Platonic worldview, which would give the individual a very much, you know, balanced understanding of not only themselves, but the nature and the circumstances of life that they project.
Well, anyway, again, my thinking is that there is no something absolute to consider, but we can improve our lives if we have, for instance, a meter of judging things, like who destroys the internal and external balance. If we know what it is, internal and external balance, we will see that those that destroy it, they know about these two models.
All right, so from the Platonic point of view, John, there is no they. And there is one indubitable principle, and that is self. That's the only thing that we can know. Everything else must be based on, our understanding of the world must be based on our existence, not what we think exists externally. Gravity and the sun and the planets revolving. This is just a model that helps us talk to each other.
Yeah, but
it isn't real.
I wear glasses to see, you know, the letters. You do the same, okay? But these glasses are based on three conflicted theories. The one, you know, cannot is totally different than the other.
Well, John, what you're talking about is the theory of light. You're talking about the theory of light. There is no light. It's a nonsense. So from a Platonic point of view, there could not be light. So there's no point in us trying to, say, well, because I do this, then that. We must start from what is indubitable, and that is the self. That is the starting point for all inquiry, not what appears to be external from ourselves. The Aristotelian viewpoint is a complete waste of time if we want to understand ourselves. All right? It works for consensus. It is reality. It's not actuality. And that's why I think that our conversation, our discussion could be much more balanced and create outcomes that are realistic.
Like I said, with the eyeglasses, is not realistic, but we improve our vision. Okay, and the same thing, if we have something wrong in what's going on around the world, then we can work out and find out how to do improvements.
Well,
like we
John, your assumption there is completely Aristotelian. There is no world. All right. What you're saying is there's a problem that seems to exist outside of you. You know this is an illusion. What is indubitable, what cannot be denied, is the self. And this must be the starting point. This is the primacy of existence. That is the starting point, not what appears to be outside.
Yeah, okay. But
we have
anyway, just some comments I want to put in there, because I think it's important that we have a truly balanced conversation that does reflect Aristotle and Plato's idealism.
The
I
internal
don't think
balance,
Plato's got a fair go.
The internal balance has to do with the self and is Platonic. And the external balance has to do with the actions, and it is Aristotle. And the two things I try to work them out through this equation, the mind space and the Gauss curve for the human error of the external balance. I think they converge together this way. But they start from the self, from the balance.
We have 1 hour and a half, so we have not much time. I would like to close with 2 words, Mr. Hadzopoulos.
Okay. Well, next time is the last class meeting, and I'll send you some material meanwhile. I want to have your evaluation for this class. And what I think is that we are very lucky to have these people in this class. It's very impossible to gather these people and do a class like this. And we are very lucky for that. And particularly I want to thank Helen for her work, really valuable work and analysis, because she also points out a different view of the Hellenic education, and also Jeremy, the same thing. And the coordinator, Dimitris, also always working and everything, does all this and analysis for the lab, very valuable analysis. I am glad, and I think this material could help to be able to live in a better world. Thank you, coordinator.
Okay, thank you for tonight, and good night to everybody.
Good night.
We shall meet again next Saturday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again.